to Legally Speaking. With me, Tarun Nangia. The Chief Justice of India, Justice Dhananjay Yashwant Chandrachud, is now on a decision-making spree that will speed up the disposal of cases at the Supreme Court of India. It is a much-needed relief that he's been taking, and he's hit the ground running as soon as he has taken charge. A decision that he took will have a far-reaching impact on corporate India, which is the constitution of a special bench that will only deal with direct and indirect tax matters. This is so important that this is now being discussed in various corporate boardrooms all over the country with an expectation and hope that shows that speedy dispute resolution is something that the Chief Justice of India is serious about, and we are seeing demonstrable measures to see that in action. Of course, this decision has also not gone unnoticed, is also being discussed internationally in UK and USA that this has happened. We thought that it is fit to record a show on this issue because we will get a sense of what is the feedback on this decision by Justice Dhananjay Yashwant Chandrachud. I want to welcome my panel today. We have Justice Arjun Kumar Sikri, who served as Judge of Supreme Court of India. He is known as one of India's leading arbitrators and is also an international judge at the Singapore International Commercial Court. But more than that, we also are very lucky to have him on the show today because at first he was part of that bench in the Supreme Court of India in 2016 that dealt with these kind of cases of direct and indirect tax. Thank you so much, sir, for giving your time to us and the viewers for this show. We look forward to some very interesting inputs from you. I have with me Mr. Mahesh Agarwal, Managing Partner of Agarwal Law Associates, one of India's leading litigation law firms at the Supreme Court of India, who deals with a lot of these matters. Law firms deal with a lot of these kind of matters. And certainly this decision has come as a relief to him and his clients also in some way. We look forward to some interesting inputs from you too. We have with us Ruby Ahuja. She's Senior Partner with Karanjawala and Company, one of India's leading litigation law firms at the Supreme Court, who also does a lot of matters on direct and indirect tax. And this decision also has brought, in a sense, happiness to her and her clients, because anytime getting hearing in these matters is crucial. It involves interest costs, it involves loans taken. So tax issues are important issues. Of course, she will bring in her expertise on the subject. We have with us Advocate Rohan Shah, who's a leading name on tax matters in the country, both on direct and indirect. He would be known to anybody and everybody who deals with the tax issues in the country. Thank you so much, Mr. Shah, for your time. I have with me Senior Advocate Percy Bilimoria, who also does a lot of cases which involve direct and indirect tax matters, and he will bring in his expertise on the subject. Also a well-known name in international arbitration, Percy Bilimoria, Senior Advocate, will bring in the corporate India picture. What do they think? Because of his discussions, he has had discussions with corporate India following the constitution of these benches, and we look forward to some interesting inputs from you. At the outset, may I request Justice Arjun Kumar Sikri that in the first 2.5 minutes, he shares his experience in 2016 before we move ahead and comments on decision by Justice Chandrachud. Over to you, Justice Sikri.
Yeah, thank you, Tarun. And let me first congratulate you for organizing this discussion or debate, whatever you may say, because it is really an important matter and it is an important event, or it is an important moment, as our Chief Justice of India, Justice Chandrachud, has decided to set up a tax bench. You have asked me to share my experience of 2015. So I will not go into other aspects which we can, come later and discuss about that. It was 2015, in fact, when Justice Dattu was the Chief Justice of India, and he decided to set up a tax bench. Let me tell you, at that time, our bench was primarily initially concerned with deciding the indirect tax matters. Me and Justice Rohinton Nariman, we constituted that bench. One thing I may say for your information, that at that time he thought that I would not go by seniority, but the two persons who would be good in tax, I would take them and constitute the bench. It had raised certain eyebrows also, insofar as our fraternity, judicial fraternity, or the colleagues are concerned. But that undeterred, he went ahead. And when the about 10 and a half months, the period for which we sat together, and I still remember at the end of that period, he telling me that, look, I reposed faith in both of you and you have vindicated my stand. But reason at that time was that, look, there were a lot of cases which are pending, areas were mounting insofar as tax matters are concerned. Of course, we did direct tax matters also, but primarily indirect tax matters. And we could, in these 10 months, dispose of I think, cases of at least 10, 11 years. We finished the cases of that. And had we continued for some more time, maybe we could have brought it to almost at the current level at that time. But this specialized, that may be the main reason for Justice Dattu. But let me tell you, it has, as I said, I will state that in detail later on when you ask me that question, that why tax benches are necessary. And I may say only in nutshell, maybe one reason is that, okay, arrears are taken care of, which are pending, cases are pending for long, but then that may apply to every branch of law, wherever there are cases, be it criminal cases, or be it rent matters, or be it other commercial matters, or even matrimonial or any kind of matter. But the main important thing which I am flagging just now in nutshell is that these tax matters, whether it's direct tax or indirect tax, they are becoming quite complex matters. They have been complex every time, and the complexity is added with the amendments every year by the Finance Act, in the Income Tax Act, and even indirect taxes also. And many times some interpretation is given by the court or Supreme Court on certain aspects, of which there is a legislative overruling, in the sense that the provision is amended to take care of that provision. What happens in the process, the law is always in a fluid situation. And therefore, it is very necessary. There are various aspects of the matter which are considered by first at the level of income tax officer or assessing officer in indirect taxes, going up to the level of commissioner of income tax and ITAT, and then coming to High Court and then Supreme Court. But we find, because of these reasons, which I'll dilate later, that there are many judgments which are contradictory to each other. Now, if there are two judgments of the two different high courts who have taken a divergent view, we call it jurisdictional court. Suppose there's Bombay High Court and Delhi High Court, if I give an example. So the income tax officer or ITAT sitting in Maharashtra are bound by what the Bombay High Court has decided. Whereas in Delhi, they would be bound by what Delhi High Court has decided. So therefore, this contradiction percolates down as well, the conflicting views. And in this scenario, it becomes very, very important for the Supreme Court to decide these issues so that there is a uniformity. Otherwise, then what it leads to so many cases, dependency of so many cases, and one is not sure as to what would be the outcome in view of these contradictory matters. And another aspect, as you have said, that Percy has talked to the stakeholders, in the sense business community, and how they perceive. And even today, there are many matters which are having international ramification on international taxations, GAR matters, etc. So therefore, there may be aspects which, and the decision in the tax matters is going to send right signal in right time to the international community, which you said. So it not only applies to ease of doing business, but it has a direct connect between the law and economics. So all these aspects have to be taken care of, and therefore it is imperative that wherever Supreme Court has to give its a final view in the matter, and they clear those aspects of the matter where there are disputes or doubts. In this context, I would say the constitution of tax bench becomes very, very important, and it is going to send very right signals.
Thanks. Thank you so much for sharing those analysis and details with us. Indeed, the right message goes out to corporate India as well as to the investors globally by this measure. I want to, at this point, get in Mahesh Agarwal, Managing Partner of Agarwal Law Associates, for his opening comment.
See, I think Justice Sikri was very modest in his experience about the tax bench. When Justice Sikri and Justice Nariman were doing the tax matters, the bench was so successful. I think the estimates are they disposed of at least 800 cases and about 200 major judgments. Now, if the Supreme Court disposes of 800 cases pending in Supreme Court, you can imagine the cascading effect all over India.
It was resulted in closure 1143.
1143, imagine. That would have resulted in closure of several thousand cases all over India because ITATs, CBDTs, all the cess stats, tribunals, indirect tax, all these are waiting for decision from Supreme Court. One decision of Supreme Court can dispose of multiple cases all over the country. So it was a very successful bench. For last 5 years, there has been a clamor in Supreme Court that the bench should be restored. And we are all practicing in Supreme Court very glad that finally a bench has been constituted.
Thank you. Thank you. You're saying something.
That's okay. We'll say later.
Okay. I'll go to Ruby Ahuja, who's senior partner with Karanjawala and Company. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Tarun. I think Mr. Justice Sikri has said it all. But I must say that there are three things which it brings. This tax bench will bring consistency, clarity, and certainty. Because if one roster judges hear a matter on one subject, there is a consistency, there is no conflict of judgment. Sometimes we have seen that even Supreme Court judgments, there are sometimes conflicted between two benches. And there is also certainty, because I think the time has also come that we bring certainty that there will be a hearing. Because as I repeated earlier also in your case, on your show, that sometimes there are unnecessary adjournments and all. But once a tax bench is going to hear a matter, they are going to hear it. There is a certainty because they are complicated questions of law and fact, and it requires a lot of preparation also. So I think it brings consistency, clarity, certainty, and it's quite a welcome step.
Consistency, clarity, certainty. Ma'am Ruby Ahuja has given us 3 buzzwords for this decision by Chief Justice of India, Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud. I hope he watches it. I'll go across to Advocate Rohan Shah for his opening comment.
I think firstly, all of us need to doff our cap, and that gives me a chance to take mine off to Justice Sikri and Justice Nariman, because what they achieved in that period was absolutely unprecedented, both in terms of quantum and quality. And I'll bring to the fore a slightly different aspect from what the other speakers are saying. In our system, every situation where the tax involved is more than 2 crores, the matter can go to the Supreme Court. In fact, as a matter of course, it must go to the Supreme Court. Given the increasing size of commerce, almost every critical issue which is litigated is above 2 crores. Therefore, the final word on it will only be spoken once you get to the Supreme Court. And if Supreme Court has a dedicated bench, as we now will have, you are then able to choose the matters which can be disposed of. And as was said earlier by Mahesh, that will have a cascading impact. So the fact that our threshold is 2 crore means everything gravitates up to Supreme Court, and a focused Supreme Court bench dealing with this will not only declog the system, but qualitatively offer guidance, which hopefully is what is going to be followed, ITAT and downwards.
Okay. Thank you for the opening comment, Mr. Shah. I'll go across to Senior Advocate Percy Bilimoria. Mr. Bilimoria, you've had a discussion with the stakeholders on these issues. Could you also get in the industry perspective on your opening comment and also your, in a sense, reaction on this decision?
Right. There's very little to add to what has already been said. Just one small point on pendency. So you see, if a case is held up in the Supreme Court for a while, you must appreciate that it has come to Supreme Court from down below, right? So right from Commissioner Appeals to ITAT, which is really the final decision on facts, all the way from High Court to the Supreme Court. So you may have something pending in Supreme Court for, let's say, 3 years, but it actually pertains to a matter pertaining to assessment year 10 to 12 years before. So that's one issue. And then the other issue is, of course, if the Supreme Court lays down the law on that matter, then it impacts a lot of other cases in the meantime. So until the Supreme Court lays down the law, what happens to other cases that are being processed throughout the country, which deal with the same aspect of law? So I think this is a very, very important issue for all taxpayers, whether corporate or individual. As far as the corporates, of course, would prefer to have their cases resolved and pushed along. The quicker, the better. But sometimes it does tend to happen that you manage to get a stay in Supreme Court, and then there are people who hope that it will be pending for a long time. So it's a mixed bag. It depends on which side of the fence you are sitting on.
Okay, point well taken. I'll take this now to Justice Sikri. So, we had this figure of 1143 cases that you were able to dispose of when you headed the indirect and direct tax bench. Could you share your experience of that time? Mainly because India acquired a sort of a name of being a very difficult tax jurisdiction in the recent times. There were arbitration cases which we lost and we had to pay a lot of money. That's not the sort of a reputation that an economy that wishes to grow at 7 and 10% wishes to acquire. And also, I remember that when these cases go on, they go on endlessly. They never end. We saw in some important cases over the past 8-10 years. Could you reflect on that and your experience? And what message will now be sent across when this bench sits on a day-to-day basis? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Tarun. As I said earlier, so if you now coming back to our experience and as a bench, let me tell you, initially, it was from Monday to Friday.
Monday to Friday.
We sat all 5 days doing these final hearing tax matters. Normally, as you know, Monday and Fridays are meant for miscellaneous cases. But in our bench, the only tax matters and final hearing matters were given to us even on Mondays and Fridays. But yes, after a few months, we were given on Mondays and Fridays some miscellaneous matters also, but we still kept on taking up final hearing matters as well. Because Mondays, normally what happens, if you're given even 40, 50, 60 matters and you finish those matters by lunch, then you don't sit after lunch because you are free for the day. And but then we would, after finishing those matters, we would again start taking up final arguments matter. And I still remember initially, the registry, or at the instance of Chief Justice, put 10 matters every day before us in our bench. And we found that on many days, at least 2 or 3 days in a week, we would finish those matters much early before the court timings from 10:30 to 4, but we are finishing by 2:30 or 3 o'clock or so. So we told Chief Justice or Registry that to start listing 20 matters instead of 10 matters. And most of the days we were finishing even those 20 matters. I mean, most of the days I'm saying, because there would be sometimes some matter which would be so important that it may take 1 or 2 or 3 days hearing as well. I'm not saying that those occasions did not arise. And so therefore, but what happens is that, as Ruby rightly pointed out, and this is our experience, and another thing which I add to what from my experience, that consistency is one thing which he said, and certainty. And after a few months, when we started feeling, when the matters were coming, that we have already decided these issues or on these aspects. Our judgments are already there. So therefore, it will not take us more than 5 to 10 minutes in disposing of that particular matter or batch of matters which come raising that identical issue, which we had already decided. So therefore, with the same bench, this also becomes an important feature because we know what we have already done. And let me tell you, I still remember a few lawyers after our bench was over commenting, and one of them, Harish Salve, I just saw into, or rather my my law clerk has given me this quote to me. And this is what he said: tax is a specialist field, and terse judgments to the point are always better precedents. General comments in long judgments create problems. This bench, that is referring to our bench, this bench was superb in their grasp and in their judgments. So therefore, this is the task which Bar felt at that time we accomplished. And as I said earlier also, that look, tax matters, like other commercial or arbitration matters, have their own importance. And it is twofold. One is from the angle of the complexities of those matters. And if you know the the way, particularly income under the Income Tax Act, where some of the provisions are couched, the language in which they are couched, and some of the sections run into 2 to 3 pages, and sometimes even more than 2 to 3 pages. There are some provisions under the Act. So therefore, it becomes a really very complex, and when the provisions are so long and there are provisos and exceptions and explanations added to that section, and taking care of or concerning various aspects or nuances of the provision which is there contained in that section, it is but natural that there may be different interpretations which would be given. And that is what happens many times at, as I said, ITAT level, or as at the High Court level. And therefore, and it leads to not only contrary or conflicting judgments among the ITATs, but the High Courts as well. And it creates so many kinds of problems, which I said earlier, in a nutshell. That is a particular issue which has been decided by 2 High Courts differently. Now, see it from 2 angles. Number one, as I said earlier, the jurisdictional court, whatever is decided is the law of the land till the time it is decided by the Supreme Court finally. But then the the income tax officers or the ITAT of those 2 states are following their respective courts, and therefore all their judgments are also leading to conflicting decisions. And it percolates down to ITAT and the CIT or assessing officers' decision also. Not only this, what about other high courts? Now, say 3rd High Court, Madras High Court, a judgment is shown. This is what Bombay High Court has decided. This is what Delhi High Court has decided. Now, Madras High Court, for neither of the 2 views are binding, but it has persuasive value. So Madras High Court would choose one, whether to go by Delhi High Court or to go by Bombay High Court. So therefore, this conflict is not limited to these 2 states. It is now widespread along, this is what my experience was. And therefore, there are many issues. I still remember when Justice Gogoi became Chief Justice. So he asked me that I want to constitute a bench. I told him that, look, there are at least 15 to 20 issues on which matters are pending in the Supreme Court, and the decisions of the High Court are at variance with each other. So I gave those issues. Of course, let me be very frank and give credit to Justice Sanjeev Khanna, who was High Court judge at that time. So I discussed with him that what are the matters pending in your High Court and where you find are the. So we prepared, with our efforts, a joint list. So therefore, what I'm saying is this 15 to 20 issues which are pending in the Supreme Court, which were pending at that time. And on this, that means you need a resolution as soon as possible. Because if Supreme Court has finally decided, then even whatever is decided at the assessing officer level or income tax, CIT level, etc., may not go further because it's a final determination. Though notwithstanding the fact that even after final determination, when the decision is against the tax authorities, they keep on moving. And I remember in many cases where the Supreme Court had settled the issue and still SLPs were filed, some of us were dismissing those SLP with very, very heavy costs. on the revenue or on the department on the ground that once this issue is settled, why you are filing the appeals. Anyway, that thing apart. But what I'm trying to emphasize is that thousands and lakhs of cases which are pending, awaiting the judgment on those 15 issues. And if those 15 issues are decided, how not only it would lessen the burden of the courts from High Court and down, but in future also not much litigation would be generated. So this is the cascading effect which is to be seen. And other thing which I said, that second aspect is, and that is the connect between law and economics, or the, I would say, FDI, or even when we talk of ease of doing business. Because it is not only the businessmen in India, as Percy rightly pointed out, but the business world outside also, when they come and they invest in this country, that what is the income tax regime, or what is the regime in the indirect taxes, etc., and whether there is any certainty in the judgments or not. And when the matter is still at the High Court level and conflicting decision, and a person goes to any of my 4 co-panelists who are the lawyers, they would say that we do not know today what is the situation, because there are 2 judgments which are conflicting and we don't know what Supreme Court is going to decide. So all these factors really become very, very important to have a tax bench and to decide such issues as expeditiously as possible. I would only add one thing, that and I am very sure our Chief Justice, Justice Chandrachud, would be aware of that, and he is conscious of this fact, that when you constitute a bench, constitute the bench with those members who are expert in tax laws. We have quite a few members who are very good today, 2 judges who are very good on taxation laws, because only then the purpose for which the tax bench is constituted would be served.
Thanks for sharing all that, in a sense, analysis and information with the viewers. You pointed out the name of Harish Salve. 2 of my panelists today, Mr. Rohan Shah, Mr. Percy Birimoria, and Mr. Harish Salve, have one thing in common. All 3 were chartered accountants before they pursued a career in law, if I'm not wrong. And now, so they bring in a lot of experience of understanding the balance sheet. I'll go across to Mr. Mahesh Agarwal, Managing Partner, Agarwal Law Associates. As I said, India gained an image of being a very difficult tax jurisdiction over the past 8-10 years. We all know we had the Vodafone case and many other issues where there were, too much of back and forth happening. Keeping that in mind, I want to ask you, what do you see happening with this decision by the Chief Justice of India? Is he sending out a message that India is a pro-business jurisdiction? This is more than just the constitution of a direct indirect tax bench. How would you look at it?
See, the businessmen are considering this to be a very, very important step. An expeditious disposal of a tax matter can make the difference between survival and bankruptcy. If a client who gets a demand of 5,000 crores gets a stay, and the matter is decided in 10 years, he can certainly face bankruptcy after 10 years. I'll give you an example. In the AGR case, the initial demands were about 4,000-5,000 crores. Whether it's Vodafone, Airtel, anybody could have paid very easily. Now, because the matters went up and down for 10 years, there was interest, penalty, interest on penalty, and the 5,000 demand became 58,000 crores. So a demand which the company could have easily paid 10 years back has now become impossible to comply with, and a company will face bankruptcy. So to get a stay in a tax matter, the next corollary has to be a quick decision that is both in the interest of the company as well as the revenue. So I think this decision by which tax matters are decided expeditiously is very, very important for the industry. Nowadays, what is happening, as we have seen in your earlier show, the demands saying GST are ranging between 5,000 crores, 10,000 crore, 20,000 crore. These kind of crazy demands cannot sit on a balance sheet. Even if it decided after 10 years, for those 10 years, you are showing it as a contingent liability. There is some kind of a scare in the mind of the investors, the lenders. The running of the company is very seriously affected. So in all respects, a company which is facing a demand and is contesting would like the issue to be decided ASAP. So I think with this bench being constituted and with the decisions, I just hope, we, at least in our corridors, we also have a discussion that it is important to have a tax bench. it is important to have a final hearing ASAP. You should also have a balanced bench. So I must say, Justice Nariman and Justice Sikri's bench was very, very balanced. They decided in favor of revenue where it was required, in favor of the SSC where it is required. It was not a SSC-centric bench or a revenue-centric bench. Very balanced bench, an expert bench. We hope the same thing happens, because just in a hurry to close cases, it should not happen that all demands are confirmed. That's very, very important for the industry. I don't think that is going to happen, but that is equally critical.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing all those inputs you said on AGR, GST, and the contingent liability issue which you shared. I'll go across to Ma'am Ruby Ahuja, Senior Partner, Karanjawala and Company, for her intervention.
Tarun, as Mahesh rightly said, that that this helps the businessman to know what is his position today. And it also, there's one more thing which I want to say, that it also helps, sometimes investment is a very complicated investment structure by a company. One must know which entity has to pay. I have met people, who were foreign investors, who said after Vodafone's experience, whatever it was, we don't want to invest because we don't know what liability will lie on our shoulders. So a tax bench, as Justice Sikri rightly said, that, somebody who knows. So I also feel that a domain expertise is also very important for any bench, whether it is tax bench, or I think there's a land acquisition bench or motor vehicles case, whatever the Honorable CJI wants to do, the domain expertise of the Honorable members who are going to be part of the bench is very important. Because I have seen with some experience that sometimes the expertise is not taken into consideration. We have had senior advocates who have gone to the bench, who have practiced one branch of law, but are finally doing some other branch of law, which is fair enough because you are a member of the Supreme Court bench. But still, I think time has come to look into this aspect also. And of course, as everybody said, the tax bench is a very welcome step. All the corporates are looking at, and I think it's also give a signal by the CGI that I mean business and I'll help you and I will help ease of doing business now. I think that's a signal he has sent to the bar and also to the corporate world.
But ma'am, as we saw on the issue of GST on gaming, despite Supreme Court judgments, to get it enforced is an issue. Do you think these things will require a lot of clarity?
Of course, these things will require a lot of clarity. And now that's a good example you have given. Now, suppose tomorrow Karnataka High Court finds it in, holds it in one way or the other, and everybody will land up in Supreme Court. So it helps if you have a tax bench, because industry can go and say that this is an industry issue now. Its survival will depend upon it. So if there is a tax bench, maybe they will realize the importance of it and will allocate time. Now, imagine in contra going to a bench who's already hearing maybe a labor issue, an arbitration issue, and you bring this case, they'll have to find time and slot for this, which is not easy because the courts are burdened. Because our system is like that. So I think this is one way where you can help even the industry to go and say that, look, this is affecting the entire survival of a gaming industry.
Yes. Point well taken. I'll go to Senior Advocate Percy Bilimoria before we come back to Mr. Rohan Shah. Over to you, Mr. Bilimoria.
Yes, so I agree with Ruby. It's very important to ensure that there is domain expertise. And if there is one bench that is listening to the same, to matters pertaining to the same subject, it of course helps. And I think Justice Sikri also gave an example about how that could help, because when there's a case dealing with some of their own earlier decisions, and they are able to understand the context of the matter before them a little better. There's also one more issue here, which is quite apart from tax. Tax, of course, is very, very critical, because at least I can tell you from the perspective of a foreign investor, they don't mind paying tax. It is the uncertainty, because the tax laws, as you know, change every year. And then if the tax law set down by the Supreme Court is also delayed in coming, the decisions are delayed in coming, and they get conflicting opinions even from lawyers as to what the liability is ultimately going to be. I think that's a huge disincentive to investing in India. And that is why they believe that India is a very difficult jurisdiction. So this will go a long way. Nevertheless, I just want to point out, there are certain other areas also, such as, let's take competition law. Now, competition law is a very important aspect in the economy. It is also an economic law. So just like, sometimes you need to be a bean counter to understand tax a little better. In competition law, there is a lot of economic background that goes into understanding the nuances of the law. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel because competition law has been around in USA and even in Europe for a very long time. So maybe there's a little need for something on competition law as well.
Okay. Point
Yeah,
well
so there are the similar
competition
areas.
law aspect you brought in. In fact, that gives us a topic for another episode that we'll take up. There have been some recent judgments on, I think I remember the recent judgment on Make My Trip and OYO, which has generated a lot of discussion, but that's for another show. I'll go to Mr. Rohan Shah at this point. Mr. Shah, two things. I had my two panelists, Mr. Mahesh Agarwal, Ma'am Ruby Ahuja, bringing in the issue of AGR, GST, contingent liability, but also the issue of gaming. You yourself have dealt with this matter in not one, but many states recently. And what has been your experience, A? And secondly, do you think the Supreme Court is able to get its orders implemented on these issues? Or do you think there some, in a sense, intervention might be needed right at the top?
Yeah, Tarun, I think, when you look at business in India and particularly indirect taxes as they impact businesses, the impact of indirect tax is that on a day-to-day basis, you may be conducting business which is building up liabilities for you. Now, one of the factors which really creates a scare with the international community and our domestic community is that while an issue remains unresolved and uncertain, not only is there day-to-day risk, but the rate of interest which is charged is going to be such that if this issue goes on for 8 to 10 years, the quantum of interest could be 125 as against a tax demand of 100. And I've had international clients who had tax demands of $200-300 million, who finally in Supreme Court were looking at a total impact of close to $1 billion because of the impact of interest and penalty. So I think this day-to-day uncertainty, which affects you because you don't reach decision, is exemplified in gaming. But I can tell you across the board, the auto industry has ongoing issues. You have the software industry, which has ongoing issues, the leasing industry, different aspects of the crypto. Now, all of these are your businesses of today and tomorrow. And if they don't have a certain environment in which to operate, you are going to get reluctance in investment. You are going to get irrational risk people associate with doing business in India. So I would really echo this one sentiment that what we experienced in the bench of Justice Nariman and Justice Sikri was not just quantum, but was quality. And having a bench which achieves and aspires to that quality is what is going to send out the right message. If the skew is in one direction, that it is seen as being pro-revenue, that is not good news. If the approach is that it is only pro-assessee, that also is going to create its own problems. So the bench being qualitative is key. And the other thing I must mention, both with the Vodafone judgment of Justice Kapadia and many judgments of the bench of Justice Sikri and Justice Nariman, India was seen as the fountainhead of that tax jurisprudence. Like we would refer earlier in company law and administrative law to English judgments, Privy Council, etc. Indian judgments were being cited in other forums, in other international tax arbitrations. Before other forums, we were giving as Indian lawyers opinion on what our provisions, how they were interpreted, particularly on customs, because that is a global law, also on transfer pricing. So I think that quality that we achieve will bring business certainty, but will also bring us a certain special positioning in international jurisprudence.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that intervention and sharing these inputs. I'll go to Justice Sikri at this point. Sir, lots of varied opinions on this issue. We discussed AGR, we discussed Vodafone, we discussed contingent liability. We also took up auto, software, leasing and crypto, the points that Rohan Shah brought in. Then the issue of gaming came in. I raised the issue of enforceability of Supreme Court judgments on tax issues, that if the income tax wants to issue a notice, it goes ahead and raises a demand. Many times, contrary to what the Supreme Court has decided. So I would need your analysis on that. And what is then the challenge before this bench? Because if it issues a certain order or a judgment and the income tax notices run contrary, will the aim that Justice Chandrachud set out for be achieved? Because if this clash happens, will it lead to a sort of a scenario which is not good for India?
You see, I don't see it as a matter of clash or an issue of clash, because in the first instance, we have to keep in mind, and that is not we when I say all the stakeholders, including the tax enforcement agencies, that whatever is decided by the Supreme Court, that is the law of the land. That is binding on everybody. And that is what is the mandate of Article 141 of the Constitution of India. So therefore, if a particular issue has been decided and it has, has attained what we call finality in that sense, thereafter, there's no reason at all for the tax authorities to issue notice to the SSC, which is contrary to what has been decided. So in the first instance, that is not required at all. Yes, what happens, you are right. In real practice, many times, a particular officer may still issue notice, or maybe at CIT level also, the issue is decided in that manner. But most of the time, I have seen when it comes to IT-80 level, IT-80 would go by, because IT-80 is the first, in a way, independent and impartial judicial authority or tribunal, quasi-judicial authority, because before that, assessing officer and CIT, they were the officers of the, although discharging quasi-judicial function, but still they are the officers of the department only. And many times that kind of psyche is there. But at IT-80 level, most of the times, even if it is done, it would be undone. And going by what the Supreme Court has said, and the IT-80 would say that such a demand was illegal. Of course, it results in harassment, number one, of the assessee, which should not take place. And there should be, if we talk of good governance and good governance of the tax authorities also, they should be disciplined, and they should think that, no, this is now finally decided and we are bound by that. Unless, and we, as I said earlier, there are various situations or circumstances where a judgment given by the Supreme Court interpreting a particular provision has been undone by the Parliament by amending that provision. So that's a totally different scenario altogether. But so long as that doesn't happen, it is binding on everybody. And when it comes, and as I told you, second thing, many times, even if IT-80 has decided, tax department may still go in appeal. And it had been happening. It happened with me when I was sitting as a High Court judge, and the appeals under Section 260A of the income tax authorities were coming to us, or in the Supreme Court, SLPs were coming. We were dismissing those once we found that the issue had been authoritatively settled by the Supreme Court, and contrary to that, such a appeal is filed or such a SLP is filed, we would come heavily against the department and would dismiss those in limine by imposing cost. We have imposed, without even notice to the other side, we have imposed the cost of 50,000, 1 lakh and even more on the income tax department or indirect tax authorities, whoever. So that's the only way of checking it. Of course, as I said, in the first instance, the authorities should act in a disciplined manner, in the sense that they should respect the judgment once the law is laid down authoritatively, and they should not issue any frivolous. They would be now termed as frivolous if they are contrary to the Supreme Court judgment. But if they don't do so, it is for the courts to come heavily against them.
If the court should come down heavily is the message that Justice Sikri is giving. Now we will move to a round of closing comments. We will see a lot of matters related to GST on gaming, related to royalty on mining operations, related to levy of GST, and on many other issues coming up in the Supreme Court in the coming weeks. We will keep a track of all of that. We move on to our closing comments and some suggestions by the eminent panel today. Over to you, Mr. Mahesh Agarwal, Managing Partner, Agarwal Law Associates, for your closing comment.
The closing comment is this, that you see in India, government is one of the biggest litigators. In more than 50% cases, government is on one side or the other. Out of that litigation where government is a party, majority is taxation. And how it multiplies is that a particular department raises a demand on interpretation of a section, and SSE goes to court, gets a stay. All over India, multiple petitions are filed seeking the same kind of interim order and making the same challenge. So what ends up happening is that you have group of cases coming up in the High Court and then in the Supreme Court. So you get one guy goes to court, gets a stay, there'll be 100 other petitions. So if one case is decided, hundreds are decided. So what has to happen is that the registry of the court can be told to group similar matters, make groups where one issue can resolve multiple cases, so that efficient use of judicial time can be ensured and disposal can be maximized.
Okay. Efficient use of judicial time
That's
and
the
disposal maximization. I'll go across to Ma'am Ruby Ahuja, Senior Partner of Paranjawala and Company, for your closing comment.
My closing comment is this, Tarun, that I think government also will have to realize that the onus to make ease of doing business or make India business friendly is not only on courts, it's also on the executive and the government. And as you said, that sometimes do we think that it's difficult to get the Supreme Court judgments implemented? I don't think so. That's the case. Supreme Court gives judgment. But if government wants to not follow because they want to amend it through the parliament route, or some income tax officer wants to issue notice surpassing those judgments, then I think the onus also lies in government and government footsteps also. Having said that, I think if court and government all join hands and lawyers also support, we also will have to buckle up and say no adjournments. We will be prepared. Things will become easy. And my one last request to the CJI will be that after tax bench, please bring a commercial bench. Please bring a commercial bench, because that's also very important. Whether it is competition matters, IBC matters, and even IP matters, it does help, because these matters also affect the large corporates and sometimes even micro and small enterprises as well.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think we might just also, there may be a decision on the commercial bench. I remember that in our last series on Justice Chandrachud, on this show, we had raised a demand of having a direct indirect tax bench. I don't know because of that, but it happened. I'll go across to Advocate Rohan Shah for his closing comment.
Yeah. I think the step we have now is very welcome, and I think we all look forward to, what will come forth from this. On the issue of implementation, I think there is a severe need for discipline within the tax department, where officers are actively discouraged from pursuing a line of litigation which Supreme Court has closed. And I think there has to be a system wherein the career record of such officers, where in their appraisal, the manner in which they deal with their litigations and the manner in which they implement higher court judgments is really part of how they are looked at in terms of their future prospects. Because if that discipline comes in, the layer of new and continuing litigation from assessment year to assessment year will disappear, which will strongly complement what we can achieve through this special tax bench.
Okay. I'll go across to Justice Sikri for his closing comment.
I think whatever we had to say, most of this is said. So I will only at the end wish good luck to Chief Justice. Will congratulate him for all these dynamic steps which he has started taking immediately after assuming the office of the Chief Justice. And what we have discussed is also one of the steps in that direction only. So I hope that this spirit, not only hope, I'm confident that this would continue. And let us hope that in next 2 years, we see major judicial reforms.
And I would like to end it by saying that our 5-part series on Justice Chandrachud before he took over as Chief Justice was titled Hope. The hope seems to be turning into reality. Secondly, he is another Chief Justice with the full support of the bar. They all are looking forward to the decisions he is taking, and a lot of positive decisions are coming from his side. It generates even more hope, because they say if you do good, then people wish that you do even more good. So that is something we all wish him to do. I would like to thank Mr. Mahesh Agarwal, Managing Partner, Agarwal Law Associates, Advocate Rohan Shah, Ruby Singh Ahuja from Karanjawala and Company, Senior Advocate Percy Moria, who joins us. But most of all, we would like to thank Justice Arjun Kumar Sikri, who made time and his inputs on the show proved so invaluable. He was part of this bench earlier in 2015-16. We got to know so many details. We thank you for the bottom of our hearts for making time and joining all of us on this show. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.